So in this video I'm going to be looking at why United were a lot more effective in the second half on the attack than they were in the first half, the tactical change that Arteta made at half time which allowed Arsenal to dominate the early parts of the second half, but overall how United got the better of Arsenal in this game, as well as analysing individual performances, looking at who impressed me, and in particular one player who I heavily criticised during the first two games of the season, but now looks like a completely different player. But before I get into that, I have got a special announcement from the sponsors of today's video, OneFootball, which is now the place where on a Saturday night, if you're in the UK or Ireland, you can watch one free Italian Serie A game each weekend. As well as this, you can also use all the other football features that I've spoken about before with OneFootball. So if you are interested in watching European football, but just don't have anywhere to watch it, then you can go to the competition page linked in the description, and you can check out the free match that will be streamed this weekend. You can also watch highlights of all the Serie A games, and near live instant clips as well whilst the games are going on. And by downloading the OneFootball app, you will be helping to support the channel. So from the start of the game, we saw in the build-up phase that United would set up in a 2-4-3-1 possession shape, as Arsenal pressed them in a narrow 4-2-3-1. Unlike in previous games, it was McTominay instead of Eriksen who was that deep single pivot who was dropping not exactly in between the two centre-backs of Lisandro Martinez and Varane, but definitely in front of them. And the reason why it was McTominay in this position rather than Eriksen, who maintained a slightly wider, higher position, was because United weren't looking to play out through Arsenal's high press. And so the player in that deep single pivot wasn't receiving the ball with his back to goal under immediate pressure, as David De Gea would instead look to go long rather than playing out through the two centre-backs. And this was because Gabriel Jesus and Martinelli pushed up ready to pressurise the centre-backs if they received the ball. Saka was on Malacia on the right side, with Odegaard man-to-man pressing McTominay and Lokonga on Eriksen, with Xhaka keeping an eye on Fernandes in behind him, and so Dalot was the only real outlet for United. And similar to Arsenal at the other end, which I will come on to, the pass from the goalkeeper over to Dalot to beat the Arsenal press was always on. But this was a deliberate tactic from Arteta's side to stop United being able to play out through Varane and Lisandro Martinez, and if they did, they'd be able to press them immediately, and therefore making United's build-up quite predictable. In the middle third, we saw United's 2-4-3-1 shape become a 3-3-3-1, as one of the fullbacks, either Malacia on the left or Dalot on the right, would occasionally drop in alongside Varane and Lisandro Martinez to create a temporary back three in possession, with the fullback on the other side being positioned in line with the double pivot of Eriksen and McTominay. The reason Ten Hag opts for this temporary back three is because it gives United a wider base to circulate the ball. If you think about it logically, just having two centre-backs means that your back line in possession isn't as wide, and if it is, it means there's a massive gap between the two centre-backs. The temporary back three in possession allows United to circulate the ball from one side to the other in the most efficient way possible. Because the two fullbacks in Ten Hag's system do sit relatively deep, this means that Sancho and Antony, the two wingers, are instructed to hold their advance width, pinning back the opposition's fullbacks, which in this game was Zinchenko on the left and Ben White on the right. In the centre of midfield, Ten Hag continued to use this staggered midfield, with Eriksen sitting slightly higher than McTominay, being given more freedom to push further forward, but still playing very much as a double pivot together in front of the Arsenal midfield line, whilst Bruno Fernandes sits higher in behind the midfield line. However, in the first half, I didn't think United moved the ball forward quickly enough, and so Arsenal were able to get back behind the ball and sit off in a 4-4-1-1 shape, with Odegaard and Gabriel Jesus sitting off the two centre-backs close to the midfield line, as the Arsenal backline would squeeze fairly high up the pitch for the middle third. And so this created a vertically compact defensive shape, meaning that there was very little space between the lines for Manchester United to work the ball into and then into the final third. And so what we did see, especially in the first 30 minutes or so of the game, is United were actually doing very well at keeping possession in the Arsenal half, with the quick interplay in the Arsenal half between the likes of Sancho, Eriksen and Bruno Fernandes, allowing United to keep the ball high up the pitch. But because Arsenal were very good at dropping behind the ball in their defensive unit, United found it quite hard to actually penetrate into the Arsenal box. I think earlier on in the game, United should have been moving the ball from back to front a lot quicker, and we'll see just how effective United's attack was when they were able to transition the attack quickly when we come on to the goals. In possession, we continued to see Eriksen dropping deep and playing the deeper line playmaker role, and we can see why Ten Hag does like playing Eriksen in this position, as the Dane has the passing ability to progress the United attack forward in a way that no other United player in the squad can. Here we see in the build up to the first goal that Eriksen receives the ball in the middle of his own half. Now if this was Fred McTominay or even Casemiro on the ball in this position, we would likely see either a pass backwards to one of the centre-backs or goalkeeper, or maybe a switch over to Dalot on the right side. However, Christian Eriksen has the vision and passing ability to play a sharp pass splitting Xhaka and Martinelli, and because as we can see Xhaka and Lokonga have pushed up to man press both Eriksen and McTominay, Fernandes is just positioned in behind them, and so this pass splits the whole Arsenal midfield line. Fernandes receives the ball in behind Xhaka and Lokonga, and he's able to turn and drive at the Arsenal back line. From here, one of the Arsenal centre-backs, probably Gabriel, who does eventually come out, should just hold Fernandes up. Instead, Gabriel goes to floor, completely misses the ball, takes Fernandes out of the game, but Fernandes is able to move the ball onto Sancho, and now United have a 3v3. However, from this position, William Saliba gets his body positioning all wrong. It seems like he's anticipating Rashford's going to make a reverse run on his inside, and Sancho's going to try to play a ball splitting him and Ben White, and so he's positioned too far on his right side, giving Rashford more space on his outside. And whilst this means that Sancho can't release Rashford in behind Saliba with a through ball, it does mean that when the ball goes into Rashford's feet, Arsenal are now in a dilemma as Zinchenko has to come across to close down Rashford, leaving Antony free on his outside, and Rashford's pass to set Antony through on goal is weighted perfectly, and Antony's first time finish, opening up his body and slotting the ball with the inside of his foot into the far corner past Ramsdale is perfection as well. But this goal all stemmed from United transitioning the attack a lot quicker with a vertical pass from Eriksen in a deep position in front of the Arsenal midfield line to Fernandes in behind the Arsenal midfield line. And I felt that's what United didn't do enough in the first half, getting the ball into Fernandes in behind Xhaka and Lokonga a lot quicker, as from this sort of position United are able to create an infinite amount more chances than they are when they move the ball slower and have to break down Arsenal's deep defensive unit in the Arsenal defensive third. And we would see the continuation of this United quick transition and attack as we got into the second half. Out of possession, I thought United's defensive shape and their pressing was not nearly as effective as it has been in the last 3 games, and this was partly down to United themselves but also down to Arsenal's excellent ability at playing out of a press. United would look to press Arsenal fairly high from their build-up, with the front 4 high and narrow as Rashford would lead the press from the front, Fernandes would go on to whoever the single pivot for Arsenal was, usually Lokonga dropping deep to pick up the ball, and Antony and Sancho would be positioned very narrow, close to both Rashford and Fernandes, looking to apply pressure to either centre-back when they received the ball. But what this meant is it left the fullbacks Ben White and Zinchenko free, and against most sides this wouldn't be much of an issue as that pass from Ramsdale or one of the 2 centre-backs out to either of the 2 fullbacks in space on the flanks is a very hard pass to play. But Ramsdale's ball playing ability is excellent, and so he was able to just play a lofted pass over the United press to find Zinchenko, and that relieved all of the pressure, allowing Arsenal to get out of their defensive third and then retain possession moving into the middle third. And the positioning of Arsenal's 2 wide attackers, Saka and Martinelli, also aids them in the build-up. See, let's say for example Martinelli didn't retain a high and wide position, and instead he drifted infield into a narrower position alongside Gabriel Jesus. Well, this would allow Varane to pick up Martinelli and allow Dalot to push higher up down the right flank, allowing him to then press Zinchenko as soon as the ball went out to him. However, Dalot can't do this because Martinelli is holding his width on the flank, meaning that Varane can't pick him up either, and so Dalot has to hold a deeper position, therefore giving Zinchenko more space and making him the outlet for Arsenal to play that simple lofted pass over the United press. And that is why we do see these managers who derive from the Cruyffian fault, like Guardiola, Ten Hag and Arteta, who do like to play out of aggressive presses, using natural wingers like say Mahrez and Foden, Saka and Martinelli, and Sancho and Antony to sit high and wide, making the pitch as big as possible in the build-up phase by pinning the opposition fullbacks backwards. United's backline also seemed quite wary of the pace in behind from Saka and Martinelli, and so they didn't push up as high as we saw them push up against Leicester or even Southampton. And what this meant was that United's press wasn't as vertically compact as it could have been, as even though McTominay would push up onto Xhaka, creating a kind of 4-1-4-1 shape at times, there was still a lot of space between the United midfield and defensive line, and even between players like Eriksen and McTominay, which meant that when Arsenal were able to circulate the ball from side to side, passing lanes would open up into the likes of Lokonga, Xhaka and Odegaard for then Arsenal to play out quite efficiently. But it was only in the second half when Arteta made a slight tactical change that we saw this even more prominently. In the first half, Zinchenko was holding a wider position in the build-up phase and in the middle third. However, towards the end of the first half and certainly in the second half, we saw him inverting, holding a central position alongside Lokonga. This would then allow Xhaka to push up between the lines, sitting in the left-sided half space, as Odegaard would take up a position in the right-sided half space, giving Arsenal a box shape in midfield. And the reason behind this was twofold. Firstly, with Zinchenko now taking up a narrower position, this meant that Antony was in a dilemma whether to hold a wider position, as he did in the first half, or move inside with Zinchenko. If he moved infield with Zinchenko, which he did most of the time, this then opened up a passing lane from Gabriel straight out to Martinelli, giving Arsenal the opportunity of circulating the ball across their backline and then having one passing lane straight out to Martinelli, creating a 1v1 against Dalot. But also with Zinchenko now inverting, Arsenal had an extra man in midfield up against United's three of McTominay, Eriksen and Fernandes. Now we would see Rashford drop alongside Fernandes and allow the centre-backs to have the ball, and also with Antony remaining quite narrow, this was designed in order to stop Arsenal overloading the midfield. But what Xhaka and Odegaard did is they held quite wide positions either side of McTominay and Eriksen. In the first half, McTominay was man-to-man pressing Xhaka high up the pitch and Eriksen was man-to-man pressing Odegaard, who was sitting more in the half space. However, in the second half, the positioning of Xhaka and Odegaard in the half spaces gave both of these players a problem, as if they moved wide to follow their man, this would open up a space between them, and Gabriel Jesus was dropping off from the forward line, playing the role of a false nine, dropping into the centre of Arsenal's midfield box to then receive the ball and turn out. And this was how Arsenal were able to progress the ball from their own half into the United half, as one of the deeper players would receive the ball and look for Gabriel Jesus' deeper movement, thread the pass into him, and he would have the space to then turn out, to then play a forward pass into Xhaka or Odegaard to then move the ball onto Saka or Martinelli, pushing Arsenal into the final third. And this is why Arsenal did have the better of the game at the start of the second half, creating a number of great opportunities when they were able to isolate the United fullbacks against Saka and Martinelli. And so despite the loss, I was actually very impressed with how Arteta tactically changed the game, showing how you can use the positioning of your midfield to drag the opposition midfield out of position, creating space for another player such as Jesus in the forward line to drop into that space and receive the ball, acting as a spare man, and being the link between the likes of Saliba, Gabriel, Lokonga and the forward line in Saka and Martinelli. But Arsenal did eventually get an equaliser, and it came from a turnover in the United half. Arsenal regained possession and Varane is caught upfield with McTominay in behind him. The ball gets moved on from Xhaka to Odegaard, and from this position really what should happen is Scott McTominay holds his position in that back line, taking the place of Raphael Varane because of the giant space that he's going to leave if he pushes out. Raphael Varane should then be the player to move out to close down Odegaard, but instead they do the reverse. Varane moves back into the back line and McTominay pushes out to close down Odegaard. But as McTominay moves out, this just vacates a massive space between Dalot and Lisandro Martinez. Odegaard's through ball finds Jesus' run, and to be honest, Dalot does excellently on the recovery. When Arsenal had first regained possession in this attack, he was a lot wider and deeper, but he manages to recover, puts in the tackle on Jesus to stop him going through clear in a 1v1 against David De Gea, but his tackle just moves the ball into the path of Saka, who puts it into the back of the net, giving Arsenal the equaliser. Now, whilst I wouldn't call this a mistake from either Varane or McTominay to that degree, I think it does show that at the top level you do need a high level of football intelligence, and I think if Casemiro's in that position, he instead holds his position in that back line. But overall, players do need to be aware of when they need to take up another player's position when there is a turnover, and that player maybe is too high to be able to recover. But United did respond, and once again it came from a quick transition in attack, this time after a turnover in the United half. The ball is won back and Dalot plays a pass into Christian Eriksen, and Eriksen once again is the player to break the lines of the Arsenal midfield, this time playing a first time pass around the corner, releasing Fernandes in behind Odegaard, and Fernandes carries the ball forward, and from this position we come on to why I prefer Marcus Rashford playing from the left side rather than as a centre forward. When he starts as a centre forward, Rashford is already positioned in a central position, and so most of the time he ends up dropping off, linking the play with his back to goal, but he's without doubt more effective when he's making runs in behind the back line. Now from a central position this is quite hard, because if you start centrally, if the pass goes straight through the two centre backs and you run onto it into a goal scoring position, but most of the time when you make this run you're going into a wider position, which is obviously going to be harder to score from. However, starting wide, Rashford can now make a diagonal run between the fullback and centre back as he does here, and because Arsenal are using a high defensive line, Fernandes just plays a pass on the inside of Saliba, releasing Rashford into a one-on-one position, and like he did against Liverpool, he finishes astutely past Ramsdale. And I think this is why United were able to create a lot more in the second half than they were in the first half, whereas Marcus Rashford plays more as an inside forward from the flanks, making diagonal runs into goal scoring positions. Both Sancho and Antony play more like natural wingers, holding their width on the outside of the fullback rather than making penetrating runs between the fullback and centre backs, and this is why I do think that Ronaldo should come back into the side as a centre forward and move Marcus Rashford over to the left side and have one of Antony or Sancho on the right. And I just think that when United transition the attack quickly, having Marcus Rashford making a run from the left side rather than from a central position is a lot more effective than when he makes runs from central positions, especially when you've got the likes of Eriksen and Fernandes who have the vision and passing ability to set Rashford free when he does make those runs. Rashford's second goal once again comes from United exploiting Arsenal's very high defensive line, and just from the build-up you can see that Gabriel has moved out with Ronaldo as Ronaldo looked to link the play from the throw-in, and Saliba for whatever reason moves all the way over to the left side with Fred, leaving no Arsenal centre-back in that central position in the back line. Ben White's in a tough position because he can't move over because it will leave Rashford completely free on the other side, but credit to firstly Christian Eriksen who sees that space and makes a run from deep, but also Bruno Fernandes who once again in this game plays a perfectly weighted through ball, releasing Christian Eriksen, and from this position Eriksen chooses the exact right option. Rashford holds his run so he's not offside, the ball goes across and he just puts it into the empty net, and once again another Manchester United and Rashford goal stemming from a quick transition in attack. However, United themselves also got opened up through a quick transition in attack from Arsenal after Odegaard dispossessed Eriksen in the middle of the park, and you can see here that as United do have possession with Eriksen, Dalot is actually got offside of Martinelli. However, Arsenal counter-press perfectly. The ball gets moved on to Saka after Eriksen is dispossessed, and Martinelli to his credit recognises the opportunity immediately, charging past Dalot and running into the space wide of Varane. Saka's pass is perfectly weighted and Martinelli's in a foot race with Dalot. He's able to hold his lead over the right back as he races through into a one-on-one position, and it's an excellent bobbling finish into the far corner, and even though it did eventually get ruled out for a foul on Eriksen, it did show how the pattern of the game was on a knife edge for the majority of the match, and that like Erik Ten Hag's side, Arteta's side do have the ability to counter quickly, and they do look dangerous with Saka and Martinelli making those same sort of runs that we saw Rashford make for his first goal. Now I did think in the games against Liverpool and Leicester that Ten Hag did win the tactical battle, however this game was a lot closer and Arteta did a few things that really caused United problems, particularly in the second half. But I just think that Ten Hag's worked out a system that perfectly suits this United side and the individual players within it. For me, the majority of Rashford's problems over the last season or so stemmed from United not transitioning the attack quickly enough, as I do think he struggles when he has to receive the ball to feet and he's up against a deep defensive block. He's much better in these sorts of games where he's able to make those diagonal runs into the space in behind the back line, and when United transition the attack quickly with players like Eriksen and Fernandes having that vision and forward passing ability to move the attack forward at pace, United just look deadly, and it's incredibly hard for any side in the Premier League to defend against that. Ten Hag did eventually make the right substitutions, bringing on Fred to add energy to the centre of midfield, pushing up onto Xhaka, and then bringing on Casemiro later on in the game as well to shore up the centre of midfield, moving Eriksen ahead or over to the right side. But I think he maybe could have done this around 10 minutes earlier on, as Arsenal were playing through Manchester United's midfield fairly easily at the start of the first half, but nevertheless when Ten Hag did make those changes, it did completely change the game and United looked a lot better, able to stop Arsenal playing through the centre of midfield through Xhaka, Gabriel Jesus and Odegaard. But I also thought that United had some outstanding individual performances as well. Scott McTominay looks like a completely different player from the first two games of the season. In the first half in particular, he was very good at breaking up the play, stopping a counter-attack inside Arsenal's half, which is an attribute that United definitely need in a central midfielder in these big games to stop the likes of Arsenal being able to counter quickly as they did for the disallowed goal. But I also thought he was very good in possession as well. There was a number of times where he received the ball off of either Martinez or Varane under pressure, and he showed a lot of press resistance, able to just turn out of pressure and find a forward pass, something that we haven't seen him do very much over the past year or so. But in this game I was really impressed with his composure under pressure, but also his ability to play those forward passes into players between the lines like Fernandes and Rashford, which really allowed United to progress the ball into Arsenal's half. And if McTominay can sustain this press resistance and forward passing that he showed in this game, I do think he does have a future at Manchester United, which I wasn't saying just a few weeks ago. I think Christian Eriksen in that deep line playmaker position in the centre of midfield is the key to United's attack, as when they win the ball back they're just able to move the ball from that deeper midfield area into the likes of Fernandes and Rashford, and this is why in order to have a quick transition in attack you do need a player in midfield or in the back line who can play those incisive passes to release players like Fernandes on the counter. I thought everyone in the back line, including De Gea, had a very solid game as well, and Ronaldo and Fred played their part as well when they came on, with Fred giving United the added energy in the centre of midfield that they needed in the second half, and Ronaldo probably could have had a goal as well himself, making some excellent runs into goal scoring positions, and I do think that if he starts for United he will be back amongst the goals very soon. Antony had a dream debut, doing his defensive work without the ball and also taking his goal like he's been playing at Old Trafford for the last few years. I did however think during the game that I would like to see Sancho and Antony run at their fullback a lot more often when United transition the attack quickly and move the ball out to the flank, as I felt that United in the first half maybe lacked that dynamism and real ability to run at Arsenal that they had in the second half. However, this of course could have been an instruction by Ten Hag to tell Antony and Sancho to maybe slow the attack down slightly and allow United to sustain an attack in the Arsenal half. However, given how dangerous United do look on the counter, I do think that this is something that both Sancho and Antony can add to their game, as both players without doubt have the ability to drive past their fullback in 1v1s, and I think it would make United's attack even more potent. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you get notified when my videos come out. Check out some of my other videos which will be in the description below, and put your thoughts on the game in the comment section below as well.